Hi, everybody. Welcome to NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm your host, Greg Martin. 2018 is just around the corner, and I wanted to take a few minutes to thank everybody who has helped make this a really great year for the NAUI Dive Team Report. We passed a major landmark earlier this year with our 100th show. That was really an exciting point for this podcast, and thank you for helping us hit that goal. As for topics from this past year, well, we once again covered the gamut of the dive industry and ocean conservation, and we started out the year discussing the book, The Soul of an Octopus, with author Cy Montgomery.
Well, it started when I first met someone named Athena, and she was the giant Pacific octopus living at the time at the New England Aquarium in Boston. And I'd always wanted to meet an octopus, so I contacted the aquarium. They opened the lid to her tank, and she came floating up to the top, and I could see her dominant eye fix on my face. And her arms started boiling up out of the freezing cold water, so I instantly plunged my arms in to meet hers. And soon she was covering the skin of my hands and arms with her soft, white, questing suckers. And she was changing color with emotion, and I probably was too. It was such an amazing meeting to kind of have a meeting of the minds across this chasm of 500 million years of evolution. You know, me, a terrestrial vertebrate, meeting this intelligent marine invertebrate who's able to do all these things that we humans can't do.
We did a few shows on the ocean and its preservation, including an interesting talk about coral restoration with Dr. David Vaughn.
Techniques to actually grow corals and plant them back on the reef. We call it reef restoration. And it's very similar to what we all grew up with in reforestation. You know, we take it for granted that if something happens to a forest, or if you want to grow paper mill from a forest, you can grow trees from seedlings and plant them right back. You don't have to wait hundreds of years for it to maybe happen over time. And now we actually have the capabilities in hand that is being developed to be able to regrow coral and put it out there. And yes, my first advancement with this was from my what the New York Times called my Eureka Mistake.
I had the pleasure this year of talking about the history of the dive industry with Glenn Eggstrom.
I was born and raised in North Dakota, and we had a small local lake. And one of my friends came back from the Navy with a green box that said U.S. Navy on it, and it had a place for a cylinder of oxygen and a breathing bag. And I thought, hot damn, you know. So he took that and got the cylinder filled with oxygen and got Bear Lime in the canister. It was a rebreather, but it was a rebreather for closed compartments, and it wasn't waterproof. And so I went into the lake with that and barely got underwater and knew something was radically wrong. So I went back to the surface and got out of the water and took a look, and the Bear Lime canister had flooded, of course. And so that was the end of that experiment. But I always, you know, I was a pretty good free diver, and I used to do, during the summers, I was a waterfront director at a YMCA camp in Minnesota, and I would, under that circumstance, the fishermen would lose some of their gear, so I built a planing board that you could tow behind a outboard. The fishermen always knew exactly where they dumped the stuff. You know, it's like the X on the bottom of the boat business. And at any rate, I used to make $25 if I would go down and pick up their motors, fishing rods, just anything they would drop over the side.
In May, I was joined by Ocean Ramsey, a beautiful free diver who highlights the plight of the shark.
I didn't grow up with the movie Jaws, so I just got to see how incredible they were without any kind of preconceived notions or influence from the media. And as I grew up and, furthered kind of my career in marine biology and research and also diving, becoming a dive instructor and teaching around the world, and again, spending so much time with sharks and realizing that a very common question for people getting into diving, getting into the ocean was, are we going to see a shark, in a very scared kind of manner. And I was more than happy to introduce them to sharks and quickly dispel the, kind of common misperceptions that people have about sharks. And that really pushed me into conservation, especially with the research, just doing population counts for sharks. And throughout my lifetime, I've seen sharks pretty much everywhere I would dive around the world. I mean, we're talking like over 30 countries being wiped out. So it's really sad. Once you get to know them, you're just shocked at how incredible they are.
Well, the grandson of diving legend Jacques Cousteau, Fabien, joined me at one point this last year for a chat.
Occasionally we do have to get serious and roll up our sleeves and relay not only the beauty and majesty of this mysterious place, but also its fragility and its integral underpinnings into what makes us possible, viable, and have a future on this planet. And so occasionally, actually more than occasionally, unfortunately for me, I do wear a second hat, which is to go and be part of these discussions and occasionally get to be a little bit more verbose on stage and hopefully influence in a positive way the decision makers to making better decisions that we've made so far, so that our future generations can inherit what we've taken for granted, essentially.
At the end of July, we lost one of our own. NAUI's Randy Shaw passed away unexpectedly. Even though he had just retired from NAUI, he is still being missed. Our friends at NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, discussed a couple of different topics, including some proposed marine sanctuaries and a discussion about virtual diving in sanctuaries with Chiara Zuccarino-Crow.
So in terms of the collection of the actual images, we collaborated initially as part of the XL Catlin Seaview Survey to use these cameras that are mounted on a special tripod that rotate and allows us to take 6 photos from around the same location on a really super wide angle fisheye lens. And then we've been able to use those cameras with a group now called the Ocean Agency to take photos across our national marine sanctuary system, and then we do some post-processing where we stitch those images together and kind of like a photo mosaic that allows you to go inside of that photo using the coding we've built on our website to feel like you're inside that photo and seeing the sanctuary from all of those different angles as though you were sitting there yourself.
Finally, I had the incredible pleasure just a few weeks ago of chatting with a diving legend that brought my favorite movie to life. Rico Browning talked with me about his work on the classic horror movie The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Flipper, and so much more.
I breathed from an air hose, and I had 4 safety people. One would hand me the air hose, and I'd breathe, and when the cameraman gave me the signal to go into the scene, I'd give him the air hose back, go into the scene, do the scene, holding my breath, and then when I finished the scene, I would get a hose from another safety person. And I had a signal with them that if I went totally limp, that meant I need air, because I was always moving my hands or something, and swimming or fighting. But if I went totally limp, it was a signal to say, bring me some air. And I used it a number of times, and it worked fine, and we never had a problem.
Well, what was the visibility like with that suit on?
That was one of the worst things. The eye of the suit sat about an inch from my eye, and it was like looking through a keyhole. And I couldn't wear a face mask because it bulged out too far. And I tried wearing goggles, but the problem was when the goggles filled with air, with water, there was no way to get rid of the water out of the goggles. So I just went with the naked eye. And as you know, swimming with a naked eye, things are blurred, and looking through a keyhole, it's even more blurred. So that was one of the worst things, was vision.
You know, it's been a fun year with a lot of wonderful conversations. I hope you'll dip back into the archive to catch any of those shows that you missed. I'm always looking for fun, interesting, and informative guests and topics for the podcast. So if you have a good story idea, a good story to tell, please send me a note. Email me at podcast@naui.org. That's podcast@naui, NAUI.org. And of course, if you have an interest in learning to dive or to take advanced scuba lessons, be sure and check out NAUI.org or your local NAUI dive shop. And that's this end of the year NAUI Dive Team Report. Thanks for a wonderful year this year. I'm Greg Martin. I'll see you underwater.